I took the job at Hawks Hollow Fuel and Market on a Tuesday in late October. I remember the date because it was my 24th birthday and I spent it filling out tax forms in a cramped office that smelled like burnt coffee and mildew. Not exactly how I'd imagined my mid-20s would look when I'd left for college 3 years earlier, but pride doesn't pay rent. And I'd been sleeping on my cousin Derek's couch for 2 months by then. The gas station sat 17 miles outside of Millbrook, West Virginia, on a stretch of Route 16 that carved through the Appalachian Hills like an old scar. During my interview, if you could call a 5-minute conversation with Mr. Caro an interview, I'd driven past dense forest that pressed right up against the roadside, an abandoned coal tipple rusting in a clearing, and a narrow bridge over what locals called the Black Fork River, though the water beneath looked more brown than black in daylight. The station itself was unremarkable, a squat, flat-roofed building with 4 gas pumps out front, a flickering price sign that hadn't been updated in what looked like years, and a single security camera mounted above the front door that pointed slightly to the left of where it should. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed with that particular frequency that burrows into your skull after a few hours. The shelves were stocked with the usual gas station fare: chips, candy, motor oil, energy drinks. A wall of coolers containing beer and soda rattled constantly. The security office was barely large enough for a desk, a monitor showing 4 camera feeds, and a small space heater that didn't work. Mr. Caro was a gaunt man, maybe 60, with skin the color of old newspaper and a smoker's rasp that made every sentence sound like a warning. He showed me how to work the register, how to authorize the pumps where the mop and cleaning supplies were kept. Standard stuff. The back room, he explained, was mostly storage. Boxes of inventory, a desk with old paperwork, a bathroom that I should avoid unless absolutely necessary because the plumbing's got a mind of its own. We were finishing up when he reached into the top drawer of the security office desk and pulled out a laminated sheet of paper. It looked old, the edges yellowed, the lamination bubbling in places. He set it on the desk in front of me. "These are the overnight operating rules," he said, tapping the paper with a nicotine-stained finger. "Midnight to 6 a.m. You follow these exactly." I picked up the sheet and scanned it. At first, it looked normal. Rule 1. Log all pump transactions in the blue notebook, including pump number and amount. Rule 2. Count the register drawer at midnight and again at 6 a.m. Record totals. Rule 3. If you see headlights on the road but hear no engine sound, do not go to the window. I paused at that one, reading it again. Rule 4. Keep the cigarette case locked between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. Rule 5. Restock shelves as needed, but do not enter the storage room between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. Rule 6. Between 2:13 and 2:18 a.m., do not look at the security monitor pointed at pump 4. Rule 7. If the phone rings and no one speaks, hang up immediately. Do not say hello more than once. Rule 8. If anyone comes in asking for the mine entrance, tell them we're closed and lock the door after they leave, even if it's not closing time. Rule 9. Do not serve anyone who is not reflected in the security monitor. Rule 10. If you see the same person in 2 places at once, do not let either version back inside. I looked up at Mr. Caro, waiting for the punchline. He stared back at me with rheumy eyes that didn't blink often enough. "Is this some kind of hazing thing?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Like a joke for the new guy?" "No joke," Caro said. His voice was flat, matter of fact. "These rules have kept this place open for 30 years. They've kept the night shift workers alive even longer." I set the sheet down, still smiling despite the way his words settled in the air. "Come on. Don't look at pump 4? Silent headlights? This is like a creepy pasta or something." Caro didn't smile back. He pulled a pack of Marlboros from his shirt pocket, shook one out and lit it despite the no smoking sign on the wall behind him. He took a long drag, exhaled slowly, and studied me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You college boys always think you're smarter than the folks who came before," he said finally. "Maybe you are. Maybe you'll figure out a better way to handle things here." He paused. "But until you do, you follow those rules. Every single one, you understand me?" The humor drained out of the moment. Something in his tone, not threatening but absolutely serious, made me nod. "Good." He stubbed out the cigarette in a coffee mug on the desk. "Your shift starts at 11:45 tonight. Be here on time. I'll stay for the first 15 minutes, then you're on your own till morning." He left me with the rule sheet, a name tag that said Noah in faded letters, and an uncomfortable feeling in my stomach that I attributed to the gas station hot dog I'd eaten for lunch. I arrived that night at 11:30, early because I didn't want to screw up my first shift. The parking lot was empty except for Caro's rusted pickup truck. The highway stretched in both directions, swallowed by darkness within 100 feet. The forest beyond the parking lot was a solid wall of black, the kind of darkness that feels deliberate, like it's watching you. Inside, Caro was restocking cigarettes behind the counter. He grunted a greeting, showed me how to switch the register into night mode, and reminded me to check the pumps every hour. Then he pulled on his jacket, picked up his keys, and headed for the door. "The rules," he said without turning around. "Read them when it gets quiet. You'll need them." The door chimed as he left. I watched through the window as his truck's taillights disappeared down Route 16, red eyes winking out as he rounded a curve. Then it was just me, the fluorescent hum, and the vast pressing silence of the West Virginia hills at night. I took the rule sheet from my pocket, unfolded it, and read through it again. In the stark light of the gas station, alone with the sound of coolers rattling and the building settling around me, the rules felt less like a joke. But I still didn't believe them, not yet. That would change in the next few hours. The first hour passed uneventfully. I busied myself with the kind of tasks that make time move. Wiping down counters, straightening merchandise, refilling the coffee station with a pot of something that smelled like burnt tire rubber but would pass for coffee to a desperate trucker. The register dinged twice. Once for a middle-aged woman buying cigarettes and a lottery ticket. Once for a teenager who paid for gas with crumpled bills and wouldn't meet my eyes. Both times I checked the security monitor like Rule 9 said. Both times their reflections appeared normally. I felt stupid for checking. By 1 a.m., the highway outside had gone completely silent. No cars, no distant engine sounds, nothing. The fog had started rolling in around midnight, thick and low, clinging to the asphalt like something alive. It moved in strange patterns, swirling around the pumps, pressing against the windows. The gas station felt like a ship floating in a gray sea. I was scrolling through my phone, reading about apartment listings I couldn't afford, when the lights changed. It was subtle at first, a brightening of the floor near the front windows, as though someone had turned on a flashlight outside. I glanced up and saw illumination washing across the linoleum in two distinct beams. Headlights. I stood, expecting to hear the crunch of gravel as a car pulled up to the pumps or the rumble of an engine idling. Instead, there was only silence. Complete, absolute silence. Even the coolers seemed to have stopped their rattling. The light grew brighter, more intense, filling the front of the store with a cold white glow that didn't flicker or move the way normal headlights do. It was steady, unwavering, like stage lights locked in position. My ears started to buzz with a strange pressure, the way they do when you dive too deep in a swimming pool. I remembered Rule 3. If you see headlights on the road but hear no engine sound, do not go to the window. But standing there, bathed in that inexplicable light, the rule felt like superstition. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe an electric car I hadn't heard pull up, or some kind of reflection from the highway, or a trick of the fog. I took a step toward the window, then another. The light brightened further as I approached, and the buzzing in my ears intensified. It felt wrong, intrusive, like something trying to push its way inside my head. I was 3 feet from the glass when the overhead fluorescent directly above me popped with a sharp crack and went dark. The sudden darkness in that specific spot, just above me, just at that moment, sent a jolt of adrenaline through my chest. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the floor mat, and caught myself against the counter. My heart hammered. The other lights continued humming, but that one fixture stayed dark, and in the reflection of the front window I could see my own wide-eyed face staring back at me, pale and frightened. I forced myself to move, turning away from the window and heading into the security office. The small room felt safer somehow, enclosed. I dropped into the desk chair and focused on the monitor showing 4 camera feeds. One pointed at the pumps, one at the parking lot, one at the front door, and one at the side of the building near the dumpster. On the screen, the pumps were clearly visible, standing lonely in the fog. The parking lot was empty. There were no cars, no vehicles of any kind, nothing that could be producing the light that was still, even now, pouring through the front windows of the store. I stared at the monitor, my mouth dry, trying to reconcile what I was seeing with what I knew had to be true. The light was real. I could see it on the floor, bright and cold, but the camera showed nothing, no source, no explanation. Then, as gradually as it had appeared, the light began to fade. It dimmed slowly, like someone turning a dial, until the front of the store returned to its normal fluorescent pallor. The pressure in my ears released. The coolers resumed their rattling. I sat in the security office for a long time after that, staring at the monitors, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. Eventually, I convinced myself it had been a malfunction, faulty wiring, a power surge, some kind of optical illusion created by the fog. The camera probably had a bad angle or a glitch. Old equipment in an old building, that was all. But I didn't go near the front windows for the rest of the night. At 2 a.m., I made myself get up and check the store. Everything appeared normal. I logged the pump numbers even though no one had bought gas. I wiped down the counter again just to have something to do with my hands. I kept glancing at the rule sheet I'd left by the register. At Rule 3, written in that old typewriter font. Do not go to the window. I'd almost broken it. I'd been seconds away from pressing my face to the glass when that light had been at its brightest. And something about that thought, about what might have been on the other side of that window, what I might have seen looking back at me, made my skin crawl in a way I couldn't rationally explain. At 2:10 a.m., I was restocking the chip aisle, deliberately keeping busy, when I noticed the time on my phone and remembered another rule. Between 2:13 and 2:18 a.m., do not look at the security monitor pointed at pump 4. I stopped, a bag of Doritos in my hand, and thought about that. 5 minutes, a very specific window of time, and a very specific camera. My first instinct was to go into the office right now before 2:13 and watch the monitor during that window just to see what would happen, to prove once and for all that these rules were nonsense. But then I thought about the light, about the empty parking lot on the camera, about the way that fluorescent bulb had popped right above my head. I stayed in the chip aisle. I checked my phone obsessively, 2:12, 2:13, 2:14. I counted seconds in my head. Somewhere behind me I heard a faint sound like fabric dragging across concrete, but when I turned, there was nothing. At 2:18 I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. At 2:20 I went into the security office and looked at the monitor. All 4 feeds showed normal scenes. Empty pumps, empty parking lot, the side of the building, the front door. Pump 4 looked exactly like pumps 1, 2, and 3. I told myself I'd been smart to follow the rule even if it was irrational. Better safe than sorry in a strange place on my first night. But deep down, in a part of my mind I didn't want to acknowledge, I knew the truth. I hadn't followed the rule out of caution. I'd followed it because I was afraid of what I might see if I didn't. The rest of that first shift passed without incident, and by the time the sky began to lighten around 6 a.m., I'd almost convinced myself the whole thing had been nerves and an overactive imagination. Mr. Caro arrived at 6:15, grunted his approval that I hadn't burned the place down, and sent me home. I slept through most of the day and returned that night with a thermos of coffee and a determination to treat the job like any other boring overnight gig. I was restocking the candy bars around 2 a.m. when I heard a car pull up outside, an actual car this time with engine noise and everything. I looked up to see a beat-up Honda Civic parking near the front door. A woman got out, early 30s, wearing jeans and a flannel jacket, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. I recognized her immediately. Jess Harper. We'd gone to the same high school, though she'd been a few years ahead of me. She'd always been the sarcastic type, quick with a cutting comment, someone who didn't take anything seriously. I remembered her getting suspended once for smoking behind the gym. The door chimed as she walked in. She saw me and broke into a grin. "Noah Reed. Damn, I heard you were back in town but working here?" She shook her head. "What did you do to piss off the universe?" "Nice to see you too, Jess," I said, managing a smile. "What brings you by at 2 in the morning?" "Insomnia and poor life choices," she said, heading for the coffee station. She poured herself a cup, added an alarming amount of sugar, and leaned against the counter. "I used to work here, actually. Few years back, on and off. Quit after I found a better gig at the diner in town. Better hours, better tips, less..." She gestured vaguely at the building around us. "This? Less what?" She took a sip of coffee and grimaced. "Jesus, this is even worse than I remember." She set the cup down and noticed the rule sheet lying next to the register. Her expression shifted, something between amusement and recognition. "Oh shit, Caro's still handing these out? I could probably recite half of it from memory. Don't talk to the minor. Don't look at pump 4. Don't open the door during the witching hour." It's like gas station ghost stories. "You think they're fake?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. Jess shrugged. "I think Caro's paranoid and probably senile. I worked here for 6 months and never saw anything weirder than a drunk guy trying to pay for gas with a handful of pennies. The only scary thing about this place is the health code violations." She picked up her coffee again. "Why? You buy into it?" I thought about the silent headlights, the cold light, the empty camera feed. I almost told her, but something stopped me. Maybe pride, maybe the way she was looking at me with that skeptical smirk, like she was waiting for me to sound stupid. "No," I lied. "Just seems like a weird thing to keep around." "That's Caro for you. Weird and cheap. Probably hasn't updated anything in this place since the 90s. We talked for a while after that, catching up on the years since high school, on who'd left town and who'd stayed, on the grinding sameness of life in rural West Virginia. It felt good to have company, to hear another human voice in the fluorescent hum. Jess had a way of making everything sound funnier and less serious than it was. For a little while, the gas station felt normal again. Then at 2:47 a.m., the door chime rang. We both turned. I hadn't heard a car pull up, I hadn't seen headlights. But the door had opened and closed, and now a man stood just inside the entrance, his work boots leaving faint, dusty prints on the floor mat. He was wearing a dirty canvas jacket, the kind with a reflective strip across the chest, and a yellow hard hat that looked decades old. His clothes were covered in a fine layer of gray dust, coal dust, I realized, and his skin had a strange pallor under the fluorescent lights, almost gray itself. His eyes were shadowed beneath the brim of the hard hat, and when he looked at us, his gaze was distant, unfocused, like he was looking through us rather than at us. "What time you close?" he asked. His voice was dry, rough, like he hadn't used it in a long time. "We're 24 hours, I said automatically, my customer service instincts kicking in before my brain caught up. Jess nudged me, her elbow sharp against my ribs. She was staring at the man with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between recognition and unease. The man didn't move from his spot by the door. He just stood there, head tilted slightly, as though listening to something we couldn't hear. The air felt colder suddenly, the way it does when you open a freezer door. "You need something?" I asked, trying to sound normal, professional. He didn't answer right away. His gaze drifted around the store, taking in the shelves, the coolers, the walls, like he was remembering something. Then his eyes settled on Jess. "You remember the entrance, don't you?" he said to her, his voice soft, almost intimate. "You used to sneak in with the others, down by the river through the rusted gate." Jess went rigid beside me, her face drained of color. "How do you—" she started, but her voice caught. I looked at her, then back at the man. "What are you talking about?" Jess didn't answer. She was staring at the man like she'd seen something impossible. Her hand gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles white. I glanced at the security monitor behind the counter, at the camera feed pointed at the front door. On the screen I could see us, Jess and me, standing at the counter, and I could see the man, but his reflection was wrong. On the monitor his face was blurred, on features smudged and indistinct like a photograph someone had rubbed with a wet thumb. Where his eyes should have been, there were only dark pits, empty and deep. My stomach dropped. Rule 9. Do not serve anyone who is not reflected in the security monitor. But he was reflected. Just wrong. Jess seemed to shake herself out of whatever trance she'd been in. She laughed, too loud and too sudden, a brittle sound that didn't match her usual confidence. She grabbed a pack of gum from the display and pushed it across the counter toward the man. "You know what? We're actually closing. Emergency cleaning." "Yeah. You gotta go." The man's head tilted the other way, bird-like. He reached out and picked up the gum with fingers that seemed too long, too pale. He held it for a moment, then slipped it into his jacket pocket. "Be seeing you," he murmured. Then he turned and walked back toward the door. The chime rang as the door opened, then rang again as it closed. Jess and I both rushed to the window, looking out into the parking lot. The fog had thickened, but we could still see the pumps, the empty stretch of asphalt. There was no one out there, no figure walking away, no car parked anywhere. On the monitor, I rewound the feed and watched the last few minutes. The man had appeared on camera, standing by the door. His reflection had been wrong the entire time, blurred, distorted, eye sockets too dark. When he walked out, the camera showed him reaching the door, and then he simply wasn't there anymore. No transition, no fade. One frame he existed, the next frame he didn't. Jess was breathing hard, her hand pressed against her chest. "I did used to sneak into the old mine," she said quietly. "Back in high school, me and some friends. We'd go through the fence by the river, the one with the rusted gate. But that was 10 years ago. And I never told anyone about it, not anyone who'd still be around." "Who was he?" I asked. "I don't know," she whispered. "But he knew me. He knew something he shouldn't have been able to know." We stood there in the harsh fluorescent light, staring at the empty parking lot, and for the first time since I'd taken the job, I saw fear in someone else's eyes. It made my own fear feel more real. After the man in the hard hat vanished into the fog, Jess didn't stay much longer. She muttered something about needing to get home, grabbed her coffee, and left without her usual sarcasm. I watched her Civic's taillights disappear down Route 16, and then I was alone again with the hum of the coolers and the weight of too many questions. I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen on the security monitor. The man's blurred reflection, those empty eye sockets, and the way he'd known about Jess, about something private and specific. It wasn't a lucky guess. It was targeted, personal, like he'd pulled the memory directly from her head. Around 3 a.m., after pacing the aisles twice and reorganizing the same shelf of motor oil 3 times, I went into the security office and sat down at the ancient desktop computer humming on the desk. It was the kind of machine that should have been in a museum. Bulky monitor, beige tower covered in dust, Windows XP logo on startup. But it worked, and more importantly, it had files. I started clicking through folders. Most of it was mundane. Inventory spreadsheets, supply orders, shift schedules. But buried in a subfolder labeled Archive, I found something else. Incident logs. They were text files, each one dated, each one written by a different overnight clerk. The entries went back years. I started reading. August 14, 2019. Employee, Marcus T. 1:47 a.m. Saw headlights outside, no car visible. Followed Rule 3. Lights faded after 3 minutes. September 3, 2019. Employee, Marcus T. 2:15 a.m. Something wrong with pump 4 camera. Didn't look per rules. Heard scraping sounds from outside. September 18, 2019. Employee, Marcus T. Man in mining gear came in asking about entrance. Told him we were closed per Rule 8. He left. No vehicle outside. September 19, 2019. Employee, Marcus T. Last shift. Can't do this anymore. Recommend next employee read rules carefully. I scrolled through dozens more entries, different names, different handwriting in the scanned documents, but the same patterns repeated. The silent headlights always at 1:47 a.m., the miner appearing every few weeks. Pump 4 acting strangely between 2:13 and 2:18, people seeing doubles of co-workers, phones ringing with no one there. Some entries were more disturbing. November 2, 2017, employee Sarah K. broke Rule 6. Looked at Pump 4 monitor at 2:14 a.m., saw my father standing there. He died in 2015, could hear him calling my name through the speaker system, unplugged monitor, finished shift but quitting effective immediately. March 27, 2016, employee Devin P. Something knocked on the window at 4 a.m. Sounded like knuckles on glass, deliberate pattern. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. Repeated for 20 minutes, didn't look. It stopped when I turned off the exterior lights. June 8, 2015, employee, name redacted. I let him in. I thought it was David coming back from his smoke break, but David was already inside. Both of them stood at the door. I opened it. I don't remember what happened after that. Mr. Caro found me in the storage room at 7 a.m. I was holding David's jacket, but David said he'd been wearing it all night. I'm done. The last entry in the archive was from 3 months ago, July 30th, 2024. Employee Tyler G. never showed up for scheduled shift. No call, no response to texts. Mr. Caro filed missing person report. Police found his car parked at the station at 6 a.m. Keys in ignition, door open. No sign of Tyler. Security footage corrupted for 2:03 a.m. time block. I sat back in the chair, my hands cold despite the space heater rattling under the desk. This wasn't pranks or coincidence. This was documentation, evidence, a pattern spanning years, maybe decades. I opened another folder and found something else. Photographs. Most were Polaroids that someone had scanned, the images grainy and washed out. They showed the gas station at various points in time, different signage, different gas prices, older cars in the lot. But in several of the photos taken at night, there were figures that shouldn't be there. In one image, a man in a hard hat stood behind Pump 3, his face angled toward the camera. Even in the poor quality, you could tell something was wrong with his proportions. Too tall, limbs too long. In another, someone stood in the front window of the station, inside, looking out. The timestamp on the photo said 3:42 a.m., and according to the handwritten note on the back, the overnight clerk had been alone. The last photo was the worst. It showed the parking lot at night, fog rolling across the pavement. There were no cars, no people. But at the very edge of the frame, barely visible, was a cluster of shapes standing in the tree line, maybe 7 or 8 of them human-shaped but indistinct, like shadows that had learned to stand upright. They were all facing the camera. I was so focused on the screen that I didn't notice the sound at first. When it finally registered, it had already been going on for several seconds, a faint, rhythmic tapping like fingernails on glass. I looked up sharply, but the security office had no windows. The sound was coming from somewhere else in the building. I got up and moved to the doorway, peering out into the store. The lights flickered once briefly, then steadied. The tapping continued, slow and deliberate. It seemed to be coming from the front windows. I thought about the rules. There wasn't one that specifically covered mysterious tapping sounds, but several of them emphasized the same basic principle. Don't engage, don't look, don't acknowledge. I stayed in the office doorway, listening. The tapping went on for another minute. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, and then stopped. The silence that followed felt heavier somehow, expectant. I was about to return to the computer when I noticed something on the security monitor. The camera pointed at the side of the building near the dumpster showed a figure standing just at the edge of the frame. It was too dark to make out details, but the shape was human, and it was facing the building. It hadn't been there a minute ago. I watched the screen. The figure didn't move, it just stood there, a dark silhouette against the slightly less dark background of the forest. Then slowly it began to walk toward the building. Not toward the front door, toward the side wall where there was no entrance, just a small window near the storage room. I could hear footsteps now, faint but distinct, crunching on gravel. The figure moved with an unnatural gait, jerky like a video with missing frames. It reached the wall and stopped. On the camera, it was standing directly below the side window. I waited for it to do something, knock, try the window, move away. Instead, it just stood there, motionless, facing the wall. I looked at my phone, 3:38 a.m. I had 2 more hours until dawn. I was about to go back to the computer to see if there was anything in the logs about figures appearing at 3:38 a.m. when I noticed something else on the monitor. The camera pointed at the front of the store showed Jess's Honda Civic parked in the lot. My chest tightened. Jess had left an hour ago. I'd watched her drive away. But there was her car, unmistakable, same dent in the rear bumper, same license plate. And standing next to the driver's side door, looking toward the station, was Jess. I grabbed my phone and pulled up her contact, my hands shaking. I called her number. It rang, and rang, and rang. On the security monitor, I watched Jess by the car pull out a phone, look at the screen, and silence the call. Then she started walking toward the front door. I stood frozen in the security office doorway, watching 2 different camera feeds at once. On the side building camera, the figure remained motionless against the wall, its posture wrong, head tilted at an angle that made my neck hurt just looking at it. On the front lot camera, Jess, or something wearing Jess's shape, walked across the parking lot toward the entrance with measured, deliberate steps. My phone was still in my hand, the call disconnected. I tried again. This time it went straight to voicemail. The front door chime rang as the handle turned. I heard the hydraulic hiss of the door opening. "Noah," Jess's voice called out, perfectly normal, perfectly her. "You still here? I think I left my debit card on the counter." I stayed in the office, my mind racing. The real Jess had paid cash for her coffee. I'd watched her. She hadn't used a card. My eyes flicked to the monitor showing the interior of the store, but that camera was pointed at the register and I couldn't see the front door from that angle. Noah? The voice came again, closer now, moving through the aisles. I looked at the exterior camera feed. The parking lot was empty. Jess's car, the one that had been there 30 seconds ago, was gone, like it had never existed. My phone rang. I nearly dropped it. Unknown number, local area code. My thumb hovered over the decline button, but something made me answer. Don't. The voice was male, older, rough with age, and what sounded like a lifetime of cigarettes. Don't say a word to her, don't answer, don't move. Who is this? I whispered. Grady, Frank Grady. I worked your shift for 20 years before my heart gave me an excuse to quit. Caro lets me keep remote access to the cameras. Someone needs to keep an eye on things. He coughed, a wet, rattling sound. I saw you looking at the monitors. I saw what walked in. Listen very carefully. Whatever's out there asking for you, it's not your friend. How do you know? Because I've seen it before. Different faces, same trick. It copies people, wears them like clothes, and once it gets you talking to it, once you acknowledge it's real, once you let it inside your head. He trailed off. Let's just say there's a reason the rules tell you not to engage. Through the office doorway, I could see a shadow moving across the far wall of the store. The fluorescent lights flickered. Noah? The voice was still Jess's, but there was something underneath it now, a second tone that harmonized wrong. I know you're here. I can hear your heartbeat. That last sentence, that wasn't something Jess would ever say. What do I do? I asked Grady, my voice barely audible. You follow the rules, you don't answer, you don't look, you wait it out? He paused. Rule 10. You remember it? I did. If you see the same person in two places at once, do not let either version back inside. But I already let her in, I said. No, Grady corrected. It let itself in. The door was never locked. You're 24 hours. But there's a difference between leaving a door unlocked and inviting something through. Right now, it's testing you. Seeing if you'll acknowledge it. If you'll play along. The shadow on the wall grew larger. Footsteps echoed on the linoleum, slow, measured, the rhythm slightly off, like someone trying to remember how walking works. It knows things, I said. The man earlier, he knew about Jess, about her past. Of course it does, Grady interrupted. This place sits on top of something old. The mine's been abandoned since the 70s, but before that there were accidents. Cave-ins, floods. Men died down there in the dark, trapped, forgotten. And this stretch of land, he coughed again. Let's just say the indigenous folks avoided it long before we showed up. The rules aren't about keeping things out, son. They're about keeping you separate from what's already here. On the monitor, I watched as the shape that wasn't Jess moved past the chip aisle, her head swiveling like a security camera, scanning. In the low resolution of the feed, her face looked wrong. Features just slightly misaligned, mouth a bit too wide. How do I make it leave? I asked. You don't. You wait. It can only hold the shape for so long, and it can only stay active during certain hours. You've got... I heard papers rustling on his end. You've got until about 4:30, then it'll go dormant until tomorrow night. That's over an hour, I said. Then you'd better find something to do that doesn't involve interacting with it. And Noah, his voice dropped lower. If you start hearing yourself, your own voice, calling from somewhere in the building, you get out. You get in your car and you don't come back. That's the line. That's when it's already too late. Why would I hear myself? But he'd hung up. I pocketed the phone and focused on the monitors. The Jess thing had stopped moving. She was standing in the center of the store, head down, arms at her sides. On the camera, she looked like a mannequin, too still, too perfect. Then she looked up, directly at the security camera, and smiled. It was Jess's smile, but it stretched too far, showing too many teeth. Her eyes were black from lid to lid, no whites, no iris, just endless dark. "I know you can see me, Noah," she said, her voice coming through the monitor's speaker now, tinny and distorted. "I know you're watching. Don't you want to come out and talk? We're friends, aren't we? We went to school together. Remember sophomore year when you had a crush on Sarah Michaels? Remember how you used to stare at her in chemistry class?" My blood went cold. I had never told anyone about that. It had been a stupid teenage crush, something I'd buried in the back of my mind years ago. "Remember how you felt when she started dating Brandon Miller?" The thing continued, its voice shifting slightly, deepening. "Remember how angry you were, how you thought about—" I yanked the speaker cable from the monitor. The voice cut off. On the screen, the Jess thing tilted its head, the smile fading. Then it turned and walked toward the back of the store, toward the storage room, and disappeared from the camera's view. I checked the other feeds. The figure by the side window was gone. The parking lot was empty. But I knew, could feel in the way the air had thickened, the way the lights hummed at a slightly different frequency, that I wasn't alone. I sat in the security office, door closed, and watched the monitors for the next 70 minutes. I saw shadows move at the edges of frames. I saw the lights in the store flicker on and off in patterns that might have been random or might have been something trying to communicate. I saw, at one point, what looked like a handprint appear on the inside of the front window, pressing against the glass from within the store even though nothing visible was making it. At 4:28 a.m., the pressure changed. The humming stopped. The shadows retreated. When I finally worked up the courage to leave the security office and check the store, everything looked normal. The floors were clean, the shelves straight, the coolers running. There was no sign that anything had been inside. But on the counter next to the register was Jess's debit card. The one she'd never used. The one she'd never lost. I called in sick the next night. Mr. Caro didn't sound surprised, just told me in his raspy voice that if I wasn't back by the following shift, he'd have to find someone else. I spent the day sleeping poorly, waking every few hours with the image of that too wide smile burned into my thoughts. Jess hadn't answered any of my texts. Her social media showed she'd posted a picture of breakfast at the diner where she worked, smiling normally, looking like herself. I told myself she was fine, that whatever had worn her face in the gas station hadn't actually been her. But I kept thinking about what Grady had said. It copies people, wears them like clothes. The second night I called in, Caro's tone shifted from resigned to annoyed. "You coming back or not, Reed?" I thought about lying, about saying I'd found another job or had a family emergency. But the truth was I needed the money. Derek was getting impatient with me crashing on his couch, and my savings were almost gone. Besides, some stubborn part of me refused to believe I'd been chased off by something I didn't even understand. So on the third night, I showed up at 11:45 p.m. with the rules memorized and a small voice recorder in my pocket, something I'd bought at Walmart, thinking maybe I could document what happened, create evidence, make sense of it all. Caro was waiting by the door, smoking. He looked me over with those watery eyes and nodded slowly, as if I'd passed some test by coming back. "You saw something," he said, not a question. "Yeah. And you're here anyway." He took a drag, exhaled. "That's either brave or stupid, haven't figured out which yet." He left me with the same instructions as always, and then I was alone with the fluorescent hum and the waiting darkness outside. The first hour was quiet, too quiet. No customers, but no cars on the highway. The fog was back, thicker than before, pressing against the windows like something trying to find a way in. I kept the rule sheet on the counter in front of me, one hand always resting near it like a talisman. At 1:47 a.m., the silent headlights came. This time, I didn't even consider looking. I went straight into the security office, turned the chair away from the monitors, and waited. The light washed through the open doorway, cold and bright, and with it came that underwater pressure in my ears. I could hear my own heartbeat, too loud, too fast. The light stayed for 4 minutes, I counted, and then faded. When I checked the exterior cameras afterward, there was nothing. Just fog and empty asphalt. At 2:10 a.m., I prepared myself for the window between 2:13 and 2:18 when I wasn't supposed to look at Pump 4. I went into the main store, deliberately keeping my back to the security office, and started mopping the floor. Busy work, anything to keep from being tempted. But at 2:13, I heard it. "Noah," my mother's voice. I froze, the mop handle slipping in my grip. "Noah, honey, I'm outside. I'm so cold." My mother had died 2 years ago. Ovarian cancer. I'd been with her at the end, holding her hand in a hospice room that smelled like disinfectant and lilies. Her last words to me had been, "Don't waste your life, baby, promise me." I hadn't kept that promise. "Please, Noah, it's so cold out here. I just want to see you. I just want to come inside where it's warm." The voice was perfect. Exactly her cadence, her tone, the way she used to say my name when she was worried about me. I felt tears burning in my eyes before I could stop them. "I know you can hear me. Please don't leave me out here in the cold." My feet moved on their own, carrying me toward the security office. Some primal part of my brain, the part that remembered being a child, that remembered my mother as safety and warmth, overrode logic. I reached the doorway. The monitor was right there, showing all 4 camera feeds. I could see Pump 4 on the screen, grainy and dark in the fog. "Just look at me, sweetheart, just once. I miss you so much." My hand reached for the edge of the desk, steadying myself. I was leaning toward the monitor, my eyes starting to focus on that specific feed, when something Grady had said surfaced through the fog of emotion. "Once you let it inside your head." This wasn't my mother. My mother was dead. She was ash in an urn on Derek's mantle because I couldn't afford a proper burial plot. Whatever was speaking with her voice was using my grief, my guilt, like a crowbar to pry me open. But God, it sounded so much like her. "Noah, please." I grabbed the power cable and yanked it from the wall. The monitors went dark. The voice cut off mid-word. The overhead lights began to flicker, slow at first, then faster, like a strobe. In the stuttering illumination, I saw shadows moving wrong, stretching and contracting in ways that didn't match any light source. The temperature dropped. I could see my breath suddenly, white clouds in the frozen air. Something slammed into Pump 4 outside, hard enough that I heard the impact through the walls. A metallic boom that echoed across the empty highway. I stumbled backward out of the security office, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break a rib. The fluorescent lights were going crazy now, the entire store flashing like a nightclub. Shelves rattled, a bag of chips fell to the floor. And through it all, I heard my mother's voice again, but different now, layered, multiplied, coming from every direction at once. "Why won't you look at me? Why won't you look at me? Why won't you look at me?" I covered my ears and squeezed my eyes shut, reciting the rules in my head like a prayer. Don't look, don't answer, don't engage, don't break pattern, don't... At 2:18 a.m., it stopped. The lights steadied. The temperature rose. The voice disappeared like someone had flipped a switch. I opened my eyes slowly. The store looked normal again, fluorescent and mundane. The kind of place where the worst thing that could happen was running out of coffee filters. But my hands were shaking, and when I tried to walk, my legs nearly gave out. I'd been seconds from breaking the rule. Seconds from looking at that monitor. And some part of me, some deep animal part, knew that if I had looked, I wouldn't be me anymore. Not completely. I should have left after that. Should have walked out, gotten in my car, and never come back. But I didn't. Maybe it was stubbornness, or maybe something in me had already changed. Some line had been crossed that I wasn't fully aware of yet. I stayed at that counter for the next 3 hours, watching the clock, jumping at every sound. At 3:33 a.m., a time that appeared nowhere on the rule sheet, the power went out. Not flickering this time, just a complete instantaneous cut to black. The fluorescent lights died, the coolers stopped humming, the register's display went dark. For a moment the silence was absolute, so complete that I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. Then emergency lighting kicked in. Battery-powered fixtures mounted near the exits, bathing everything in a dim red glow that made the aisles look like the inside of a wound. I pulled out my phone for the flashlight, but the screen wouldn't turn on. Dead, even though it had been at 67% a minute ago. I tried the landline behind the counter. No dial tone. Outside, through the front windows, I saw them. The silent headlights, back again, but different this time. There were dozens of them arranged in a semicircle around the station, all pointing inward. Cold white light poured through every window, casting long shadows that moved independent of any source. The door chime began ringing on its own, a steady, rhythmic ding, ding, ding. Though the door stayed closed, I backed away from the counter, my breathing shallow. The red emergency lights flickered, and in that moment of darkness I heard footsteps. Not from outside, from inside the store, from the back hallway. When the light steadied, I saw it, a figure standing at the far end of the store, near the restrooms and storage area, positioned directly under the exit sign. It was human-shaped but wrong in every detail, too tall, proportions stretched, arms hanging slightly too long at its sides. It had no face, just a smooth, dark surface where features should have been. And it was blocking the only path to the breaker box. The rules didn't cover this. There was nothing on that laminated sheet about power outages, about figures appearing at 3:33 a.m., about what to do when everything you'd been told to avoid suddenly converged all at once. But I understood something in that moment, something Grady's words had hinted at. The rules weren't a complete manual. They were just the patterns that previous people had noticed, the survival strategies that had worked often enough to be written down. The real rule, the one underneath all the others, was simpler. Don't engage, don't acknowledge. Don't give it permission to be real. Every rule came back to that same principle. Don't look at the headlights. Don't acknowledge them. Don't look at pump 4. Don't acknowledge what's there. Don't serve people without reflections. Don't acknowledge their existence. Don't answer. Don't engage. The thing at the end of the aisle wanted me to react, to run, to scream, to acknowledge its presence. That's what would give it power. I took a slow breath and started walking toward it. Every instinct screamed at me to stop, to turn around, to do anything else. My legs felt like they were moving through cement. The figure didn't move as I approached, but I could feel a tension radiating from it, cold and patient and hungry. I kept my eyes fixed on a point on the wall beyond it, refusing to look directly at where its face should be. I thought about nothing, let my mind go blank. Became a body moving through space without thought or fear or recognition. As I got closer, the temperature dropped so sharply that frost formed on my eyelashes. I could hear breathing, not my own, something else's, wet and ragged, coming from where the figure stood. 10 feet away. 5 feet. I passed it. For a moment we were side by side in that narrow hallway, and I felt something massive and old pressing against the edges of my awareness, trying to force its way in. The air felt thick, resistant, like walking through water. I could smell earth and decay and something chemical, sharp and wrong. The figure's head turned as I passed, tracking me with that smooth, featureless surface. But I didn't look, didn't acknowledge, kept walking. I reached the breaker box mounted on the wall near the storage room door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the metal handle. I yanked it open and found the main breaker, flipped it down, then back up. Nothing happened. I tried again, and again. Behind me, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming closer. On the fourth try, the power surged back to life. The fluorescent lights blazed on bright and harsh. The coolers resumed their humming. The register beeped its startup sequence. I turned around. The hallway was empty. The figure was gone. On the security monitors in the office, now functioning again, I could see the exterior feeds. The parking lot was empty, the highway dark. No headlights, no cars, nothing but fog rolling across the pavement. Everything looked normal. But when I checked the footage, rewinding to see what the cameras had captured during the power outage, there was nothing. Just static and corrupted data for the period between 3:33 and 3:51 a.m. 18 minutes that didn't exist. I spent the rest of my shift in the security office, door closed, watching the monitors. Nothing else happened. At 6 a.m., the sky began to lighten, and Mr. Caro's truck pulled into the lot. When I came out, he took one look at me and nodded slowly, the same way he had when I'd first returned after my nights off. "Bad one?" he asked. "Yeah." He didn't ask for details, just counted the register, checked that everything was in order, and sent me home. As I walked to my car, I noticed something I'd missed before. Carved into the wooden post supporting the price sign, almost hidden by layers of old paint, were tally marks. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Each one, I realized, representing a night someone had survived. I didn't add my own mark, but I thought about it. I worked 3 more shifts after that night. Mr. Caro never asked me what I'd experienced, and I never volunteered the information. We existed in an unspoken understanding, him knowing I'd seen things that couldn't be explained, me knowing that he'd hired me with full awareness of what I'd face. The gas station continued operating, continued serving the occasional late-night traveler, continued existing in its pocket of impossible reality on Route 16. But I was different now. Changed in ways that were hard to articulate. I followed the rules perfectly during those final shifts. I stopped questioning them, stopped trying to rationalize them. When the silent headlights appeared at 1:47 a.m., I went into the security office without hesitation. When 2:13 arrived, I was already in the main store with my back turned. When the door chime rang but no one was visible on the cameras, I stayed behind the counter and didn't investigate. The station seemed to respond to my compliance. The phenomena became less aggressive, more routine. The lights still flickered occasionally. I still heard sounds that shouldn't exist. But nothing approached me directly. Nothing tested me the way it had before. On my second-to-last shift, Jess came by around 1 a.m. She was the real Jess this time. I checked the monitor first, saw her reflection clear and normal before she even got out of her car. She bought coffee and cigarettes and made small talk about the diner, about her plans to maybe move to Charleston and get a real job. I almost told her what I'd seen, what had worn her face and known her secrets. But I didn't. Some burdens don't transfer well in words. Instead, I just told her to be safe, and she laughed and said it was West Virginia. What could possibly happen? As she left, she paused at the door. "Hey, Noah, you doing okay? You look, I don't know, tired." "I'm fine," I said, "just adjusting to overnight work." She nodded slowly, like she didn't quite believe me, and left. On my last shift, I'd decided it would be my last, had already told Caro I was moving back to Ohio, that I'd found a job prospect there, a lie, but a necessary one. I arrived at 11:45 p.m. to find something different. The rule sheet had changed. Not drastically, most of it was the same. But at the bottom, written in ink that looked fresh, was a new rule. Rule 11. If you start hearing your own voice over the intercom, clock out and don't come back. I stared at that line, my skin prickling. I hadn't written it. Caro claimed he never touched the rules, said they updated themselves, had been doing so for 30 years. I'd thought he was being metaphorical. I wasn't so sure anymore. I worked that final shift in a state of hyper-awareness, listening for any sound that resembled my own voice, any echo or reverberation that might be the intercom activating. It never came. The night passed quietly, almost peacefully, and when dawn broke and Caro arrived to relieve me, I handed him my name tag and told him I was done. He accepted it without argument, just reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope with my final paycheck. "You lasted longer than most," he said. "That means something." "What does it mean?" I asked. He looked at me with those watery eyes, and for a moment I thought he might actually give me an answer, might explain what the station was, why it existed, what lurked in the fog and forest around it. Instead, he just said, "Means you know when to stop pushing." I left Hawks Hollow that morning and drove straight through to Ohio without stopping, without looking back. I crashed with an old roommate from college, found a job washing dishes at a restaurant, started rebuilding something resembling a normal life. But I couldn't fully leave it behind. I still wake up sometimes at 1:47 a.m., heart racing, listening for silence where engine sounds should be. I find myself avoiding gas stations at night, especially ones that look too isolated, too old, too much like they're waiting for something. And every so often I check the local West Virginia news online, searching for any mention of Hawks Hollow, of missing persons, of strange incidents on Route 16. There's never anything. The station continues operating. Life goes on. Last week, I was scrolling through social media when I saw a post from someone I vaguely recognized from high school, a girl named Lena who'd been a few years behind me. The post was a selfie of her in a gas station uniform, smiling, caption reading, "New job. Overnight shift starts tomorrow. Wish me luck." The background of the photo showed a wall of coolers, a register, and in the corner, just barely visible, a piece of paper taped to the counter. A laminated rule sheet. I stared at that photo for a long time, my thumb hovering over the comment button. I wanted to warn her. Wanted to tell her to quit before she started, to run far away and never look back. But what would I say? That the gas station was haunted? That rules written on laminated paper were the only thing keeping her safe from something that wore people's faces and spoke with their voices? She'd think I was insane. So I said nothing. Just closed the app and tried to forget. But I can't forget. Because 3 days ago I received a friend request on Facebook from someone named Lena. I accepted it, curious, and immediately got a message. "Hey, you used to work at Hawks Hollow, right? I found your name tag in the security office. I have some questions about the rules. Can we talk?" I haven't responded yet. I don't know if I will. Because the message came through at 2:14 a.m., and when I checked Lena's profile to see if she was online, her profile picture showed her standing in the gas station, smiling at the camera. And behind her, reflected in the window, was another Lena, facing the wrong direction. I don't sleep much anymore. It's been 3 months since I left Hawks Hollow, and I've learned something that maybe I should have understood from the beginning. You don't really leave that place. Not completely. It follows you. Not in the literal sense. I'm not being haunted, not seeing figures in my apartment or hearing my own voice in the dark. But psychologically, emotionally, it's left a mark that hasn't faded. I never responded to Lena's message. I told myself it was because I didn't know what to say, but the truth is simpler. I was afraid. Afraid that by engaging with her, by acknowledging what she was experiencing, I'd somehow pull myself back into that world. So I deleted the message, blocked her profile, and tried to move on. But guilt is a persistent thing. 2 weeks after blocking her, I searched her name in the West Virginia missing persons database. Nothing came up. I checked the Hawks Hollow Fuel and Market Facebook page. They had one, surprisingly, though it was barely maintained. The most recent post was from a week ago, a grainy photo of the station at sunrise with the caption, "Now hiring. Overnight position available, competitive pay, inquire within." The same notice they always posted. The same position that never stayed filled for long. I told myself Lena was fine, that she'd either quit like I had or she'd learned to follow the rules and was surviving. But I couldn't shake the image of that profile picture. The two versions of her, one facing the camera, one facing away. Last night I broke my own rule and unblocked her profile. I needed to know. Her page was still active. Recent posts showed her at the diner in Millbrook at a friend's birthday party at home with her cat. She looked normal, happy even. There was no mention of the gas station, no references to strange occurrences or impossible rules. But the profile picture had changed. Now it showed her standing outside Hawks Hollow at night, the station's lights glowing behind her. She was alone in the photo, no reflection, no duplicate figure. Just Lena, smiling at the camera, one hand raised in a casual wave. And in the bottom corner of the image, barely visible in the darkness beyond the parking lot, was a cluster of shapes standing in the tree line. Human-shaped but indistinct, like shadows that had learned to hold form. They were all facing the camera. I've started having a recurring dream. In it, I'm back at the station, standing behind the counter during the graveyard shift. The store is empty, silent except for the fluorescent hum. The rule sheet is in front of me, but when I try to read it, the words swim and blur, rearranging themselves into patterns I can't understand. The door chime rings. I look up and there's someone walking through the aisles. At first, I think it's a customer, but as they get closer, I realize it's me. Another Noah wearing the same clothes, same expression, moving with the exact cadence of my own walk. He stops at the counter, looks at me, and smiles. "Your shift's almost over," he says in my voice. "I'm here to relieve you." And I realize that I can't remember how long I've been standing there. Can't remember when my shift started. Can't remember anything except the rules, the lights, the endless loop of midnight to 6 a.m. I try to speak, to tell him that I don't work here anymore, that I left months ago. But when I open my mouth, no sound comes out. The other Noah just keeps smiling and reaches for the rule sheet. That's when I wake up sweating, disoriented, checking my phone to make sure I'm really in my apartment in Ohio and not back in that gas station in West Virginia. But the worst part, the part that keeps me awake after the dream fades, is that I'm not entirely sure I did wake up. This morning I found something in my jacket pocket. I don't remember putting it there, don't remember seeing it before. It's a laminated card worn at the edges with text printed in that same typewriter font. Rule 12. If you dream about returning, resist the urge to visit. The station remembers everyone who worked there. I don't own a laminator. I haven't been anywhere near Hawks Hollow in 3 months. And yet here it is, solid and real, proof that some connections aren't severed by distance or time. I keep telling myself I'm free of that place, that I made the choice to leave and I'm living with the consequences of my decision. But late at night, when I'm lying awake at 1:47 a.m., or 2:14 a.m., or 3:33 a.m., I wonder if anyone really leaves Hawks Hollow, or if the station just lets you think you have. Yesterday, I got a call from an unknown West Virginia number. I let it go to voicemail. When I checked later, there was a message. "Mr. Reed, this is Donald Caro. I hope you're settling in well wherever you ended up. I wanted to let you know we filled the overnight position. Young lady named Lena, she's doing fine, learning the ropes. But she asked about you specifically. Said she found some of your notes in the security office. Personal things. I thought you might want them back. If you're ever passing through West Virginia, stop by. Your things will be here. I haven't taken notes, haven't written anything down. Every word I put on paper felt like tempting fate, like creating evidence of things that shouldn't be acknowledged. But Caro's message was clear. There was something there with my name on it. Something that hadn't been there when I left. I won't go back. I can't. But I also can't stop thinking about it, about what notes Caro might have found, what personal things might be waiting for me in that security office. Messages I don't remember writing, rules I don't remember creating, evidence of a version of myself that never left. Last night, I was walking home from my dishwashing shift when I passed a 24-hour gas station on the outskirts of town. It was a national chain, brightly lit, modern, nothing like Hawks Hollow. But something made me stop and look. In the window, taped to the glass, was a handwritten sign. Overnight position available, inquire within. Underneath, in smaller letters, experience with night shifts preferred. I stood there on the sidewalk staring at that sign and felt a pull I couldn't explain. Not a compulsion exactly, more like recognition, like calling to like. I didn't go inside. I walked away, went home, locked my door, and tried to convince myself it meant nothing. But I've been thinking about what Grady told me during that phone call, about how the rules are what's left after everyone who broke them stopped coming to work. About how the station sits on top of something old and the rules aren't about keeping things out, they're about keeping you separate from what's already there. What if it's not just Hawks Hollow? What if that 24-hour station and 100 others like it across the country all sit on similar fault lines? Places where the ordinary world grows thin, where rules become necessary for survival. What if the overnight shift everywhere is something more than just bad hours and fluorescent lights? I don't have answers, maybe I never will, but I know this. I can feel it when midnight approaches, can feel something shifting in the air, a change in pressure, a heightening of awareness. I know that when I work my overnight shift at the restaurant, cleaning dishes in a bright, loud kitchen, I still find myself checking the clock at 1:47 a.m., at 2:13 a.m., at 3:33 a.m. I know that sometimes in the reflection of the industrial dishwasher's steel surface, I see movement that doesn't match anything in the kitchen. And I know that 3 nights ago when I was walking home at 2:30 a.m., I saw headlights approaching on the street behind me. I heard their glow before I heard the engine, which is impossible, I know, but that's what happened. Light without sound growing brighter. I didn't turn around. I kept walking, eyes forward, following a rule that had kept me alive once before. The lights faded without ever passing me. This morning I found the laminated card again, Rule 12, even though I'd thrown it away. It was on my kitchen counter next to my keys, like someone had placed it there deliberately. On the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize but somehow knew intimately, was a new message. The station is always hiring. You know where to find us. I should throw it away again. Should burn it, tear it up, pretend I never saw it, but I've kept it. Put it in my wallet, where I can feel its weight against my leg as I walk. Just in case. Just in case one night I'm driving through West Virginia on my way to somewhere else, and I see familiar lights glowing in the fog off Route 16. Just in case I need a reminder of the rules that kept me alive. Just in case there's a version of me that never really left. Still standing behind that counter, still watching the monitors, still surviving one impossible night at a time. I tell myself I won't go back. But late at night, when I'm alone with my thoughts and the world feels thin and strange, I'm not sure I ever really left. The graveyard shift is everywhere after all. You just have to know the rules.